Thanks for joining us on this special broadcast. Now, ever since the COVID pandemic struck India, like it has across the world, the government has been in phases announcing measures. So the latest measures just before Diwali is here to help us understand what these measures are and what they mean for the Indian economy and for the common man. I have with me Sanjeev Sanyal, who's the Principal Economic Advisor. Sanjeev, good afternoon, and thank you for speaking to Republic TV. 2.65 lakh crore. Now, one thing that I've seen in the course of all these announcements is that all of them have a number attached to it to tell people about how much of money is being pumped into the system. To help us understand, the Aam Aadmi, the common man, who's watching this on Republic TV and the Republic Media Network, what do the latest set of measures mean for them? Sanjeev.
I think you have got to understand the context, the broader context in which we are doing this. So right in the beginning, you have to understand that our approach here in India has been quite different from what other countries have been doing, or even what many international experts have been advising us. So throughout the process, we have been saying that, look, we are not going to do this big bang, one big stimulus package. Instead, we were going to do this step by step. And as you correctly pointed out, we have begun to number them so that people do get a sense of the fact that we are doing this step by step. And why are we doing it like this? Because when we were in full lockdown between April and July, it was simply no point in doing a big stimulus to revive demand, because there's no point in pressing the accelerator when you've got a foot on the brake. So the purpose of the measures at that time was essentially to provide a safety net to the most vulnerable sections of our society. So if you remember what we were doing then, providing food, providing some Jan Dhan transfers, providing some support to the MSME sector. But since then, we have begun to open out the economy, step by step again. And then wherever we are opening it up, you're getting some revival of demand. And again, the September-October numbers have been very clear on this. But now is the time in which we are ramping up the demand stimulus part. So it is now that we are pressing the accelerator because we've got the foot off the brake. So yesterday's stimulus is a part of that. It is about reviving industrial employment and investment. That is what yesterday's package was all about.
So Sanjeev, help us understand what has been your focus in the latest series of announcements on the Diwali package. Who have you focused on and why is it different?
So it has to be seen in the context of the fact that we have had some revival and growth. So what we are trying to do is to now accelerate that process that is naturally happening as we are unwinding the lockdown. So yesterday, first of all, a big focus was job creation in the private sector. And so what we have done is we have provided a subsidy using the EPFO framework to companies in order that if they employ new people or if they employ people who lost their jobs during this COVID period for no fault of theirs. So in that case, what we are doing in that, when you rehire them, you get a big government pays essentially its EPFO contribution. So it's a subsidy for employment. So that is the first thing we're doing. The second thing we are doing is we are encouraging the private sector to invest again. I mean, clearly during a demand shock like what we had in the last few months, investment activity obviously stalled. Not surprising, it happened everywhere. Now what we want is that in particular sectors, we want to get back in the game, be a part of the global supply chain. And we did this thing called the production-linked incentives, PLI, in a handful of sectors earlier. We got great results in manufacturing of cell phones, electronics, and so on. We are now widening this out into chemicals, textiles, and other sectors. And the idea is, in a targeted basis, we begin to ramp these sectors up, encourage investment, and basically insert ourselves into the global supply chain.
Looking at the kind of responses that we've had to all the packages announced so far, and of course the biggest headline that the opposition usually picks away from these announcements is that, hey, this is not good enough, this is not big enough. But going by the government's approach, you've been incremental, waiting and watching as different sectors open up. Now, While, of course, some people agree with what is happening, others are looking for that headline. But as far as the common man is concerned, of course, they want to know what's in it for them. And from what you have told me so far, I understand that, with the new labor laws, the telecom, IT, BPO sector, private jobs, PLI schemes, cluster sectors being looked at a whole. Now, what is the way forward? Because some green shoots that the government keeps talking of. Now, the signs so far have been positive, right? And going ahead, what's the plan for the government?
So as we have seen, certain parts of the economy, as they've been opened up, have come back. So whether you look at the purchasing managers index, power consumption, or railway freight movement, wherever we have been able to open things up, some demand comes back. There are, of course, some sectors where we still have restrictions on travel, hospitality, entertainment, and so on. But as we open these up as well, we are getting some demand coming back. Now, the idea here is twofold. One, still keep a big watch on COVID. It's not gone away. Yes. We have not yet beaten it, and Europe and US show how it can come back. So we still have an eye on that. Remember that. However, while we open things up, what we do is open a place up, get some demand going, and then give it a big push up. We can do it through the credit route, we can do it through production-linked incentives, employment incentives, or something that other countries have not done enough of, I think, but we have done a lot of, which is supply-side measures. So we have literally, in the last few months, liberalized agriculture, basically a 1991 moment for agriculture. Yeah. Then we have done exactly the same thing just last week with the BPO IT-enabled services sector. We removed all the telecom-related regulations that were strangling this sector. And now, just watch what happens. And by the way, we have had a big back office operation business in India. Watch what we do in the front office, because we've all become used to using online systems to deal with the world. Even a grandma now knows how to use Zoom. So why can we not be the front office of the world as well? I mean, why can't you do medical services, legal services, front office, not the back office stuff, that we already did, but the front office of that going forward. And we can do it sitting right here. We don't need those H-1B visas anymore. Well,
you're dropping a hint, and what timeline are you looking at, is the government looking at for the next set of reforms?
Well, I mean, that's not a hint at all, that those reforms were really done. The question is, are there things that we need to do going forward in terms of ease of doing business? Yes. If there are, please bring it to our notice. We are totally committed to removing unnecessary, outdated regulations, processes, bureaucratic hurdles in the way of getting new sectors going. Because remember one important thing, the post-COVID world is not a re-inflation of the pre-COVID world. This is a very important thing you need to remember. It will have its own geopolitics. It will have its own technology. It will have its own consumer behavior, its own processes. All of this will change. So what is important is that we are proactive, we take steps quickly, and we respond to this world. And of course, meanwhile, also leverage internal strengths that we have. So that's where Atmanirbharta comes in. Atmanirbharta is not about some autarkic shell, import substitution, all those kinds of things. Very often people try to stick labels that one tries to stick. This is about leveraging internal strength in order to go out there and compete in the rest of the world.
Just talking about, a few minutes back, we were speaking about, how your approach and the Indian government's approach has been different from what different countries have been doing, global powers. It is certainly calculated. You're waiting and watching and seeing how sectors respond and taking the next step, and as opportunities arise. But have you seen that the global model of that one big headline and a one big package, has it really worked? And can it work in the Indian context?
Well, certainly, I can't really comment on what exactly the rest of the world is doing. Maybe it works in their circumstance. But the data so far suggests the following, that yes, a lot of ammunition gets used up and you get some payback from it, but the payback is quite small compared to the big headlines that are done. So if you look at all the countries that have done these huge packages, almost all of them are back on the drawing board, and they need to do more. Meanwhile, they've used up the ammunition. They've run up huge amounts of debt, by the way. None of this is free. So they've run up huge amounts of debt. But meanwhile, the amount of sort of kick to demand has been very small. So in our case, that's why we held our horses. We made sure we were targeting the stimulus to the very poor, the vulnerable sections. We're providing food, Jandan support.
Yes.
Or for that matter, for the businesses, we were providing 100% guaranteed loans and so on, but very targeted. No general providing of stimulus that was being done. Instead, what we were doing during the lockdown, we're doing supply side opening up. Now we have come back to doing demand stimulation, but again, notice very, very focused, and we are digging in for a marathon. So when we are saying we're giving this PLI scheme, it's not for a few months. This obviously has to sustain over a prolonged period of time for it to work. Same thing with infrastructure. You can't switch off infrastructure. So once we have committed to large-scale public infrastructure building, we are also basically telling you this is going to be in place for at least a couple of years.
Yes. Okay. And finally, I was reading an article about the COVID vaccine logistics. Of course, everyone's excited about it. And I know, and I've been reading up, and everyone's been very excited about, the possibility of a vaccine soon. But the logistics of it is a nightmare. But I know that there is planning happening across the country. And that itself is a big opportunity for India. And that one sector of the logistics, supply, and storage of these vaccines, now that's going to be a huge challenge and also an opportunity for India. Now, on that front, I'd like to hear from you, Sanjeev.
See, I totally agree with you. I mean, let me clarify. I'm not a vaccine expert.
I'm talking about the logistics aspect of it and the economy aspect of it.
Yeah. So obviously, whichever vaccine or whichever set of vaccines works, one thing is clear. Mass scaling this is something India is going to have to do. We are, by some margin, the big generics players in the world, by some margin.
Yes.
So whatever vaccine happens, not just for India, but for much of the world, it will be produced in India, first of all. And then, of course, we have to supply this.
Yes.
You have to supply this to 1.35 billion people inside India, but then billions of people outside India as well. And no easy task, given all the other requirements in terms of temperature control and all of that. So as we are speaking, India's large logistics companies are sitting there trying to work out how this is going to be done. But let me say, we Indians do not give ourselves enough credit.
Yes.
We are very good at doing these big bandobast things. I mean, whether it's elections or it's the Kumbh Mela, we can do these things.
Absolutely.
And we never give ourselves credit.
Absolutely.
So believe you me, we will get it done.
Absolutely. Sanjeev, good to speak to you. Thank you for speaking to Republic TV. We'll keep, having these chats every now and then so that the people are aware of what's going on in the economy, on the economic front.